Thank you especially to Naima Muhammad for giving me this honor to speak. Just sitting here with you all, seeing the award ceremony and listening to the panel discussions before that and yesterday, I can say that I really am not worthy to be the keynote speaker. There are many other fighters, heroes who are fighting on environmental justice movement. So I really am honored and humbled to be given that opportunity. Thank you, Naima, for giving me that opportunity. I would say that for me, Black Workers for Justice, Brother Saladin Muhammad, Sister Naima, Brother Ajamu Dilahand are my mentors. They are my teachers. I came here in this country in 1999 from Pakistan. I came here I'm trained as a veterinarian or animal doctor and went to NC State University in immunology. But to me, the real knowledge that I got, that I think that I received, was through my mentors here, through Brother Saladin, through Sister Naima and Ajamu, and rest of the members in Black Workers for Justice. So going back, and then also I want to give special acknowledgement also to Professor Steve Wing. I totally agree that his real title should be a People's Professor. I don't know if Steve Wing remembers that, but in 2006, I once went to his office to do a little interview with him to talk about epidemiology and environmental movement. And at that time, we had a progressive show, and I was asking him a little bit academic questions from textbooks. And I remember, again, I don't know whether Steve Wing remember that, but he gave a very good answer. And he said, if you want to learn environmental movement, then you have to go in the trenches. You have to go in the movement to understand. It's not something that you understand from textbooks, from lectures. And this is the kind of knowledge, again, that I think that I got from this movement, and I'm indebted to you all for that. As the title of my speech today is Connecting Environmental Justice Movement Locally and Globally. So I will again emphasize, and I am again talking to a choir. Everybody knows more than me, actually, majority of the people who are working in the movement, that to me, environmental justice is a very important movement since it brings the question of race and class in the environmental movement. That's often been missing for a long time. We cannot save whales in the ocean or redwood forest, but at the same time be blind to people, mostly black, brown, and poor people who are victims of environmental racism. And sitting here, I've been hearing stories from Roger Road community in Chapel Hill, a community established by free black people over 150 years ago, and then denied basic resources like municipal water and have been a dumping site for hazardous waste. This is a reflection of environmental racism. And this is true throughout the world. If you want to see the face of environmental injustice, you will mostly see is black and brown people and poor people around the world. I did some quick research before coming here in terms of to elucidate, but I am sure many of you know, like in Maquiladoros, the US-Mexico border that serves as assembly plant for American, Japanese, and other foreign manufacturers, they dump toxic waste in drinking water. There are rivers that supply 95% of the drinking water are dumped by the toxic waste. And then there are studies in Brownsville, Texas, at the border, Mexico-Texas border, and Matamoros in Mexico. The rate of anencephaly, this is the babies born without brains, is 4 times the national average. Black and brown people throughout the world are victims of some of the worst form of environmental degradation. In Europe, the Roma people who live in ghettos that are denied sewer and water access. In one particular town in Ostrava in Czech Republic, the Roma people live in an apartment located just above an abandoned mine. Racist attacks which emits methane. Racist attacks and demonization of immigrants is also visible when you saw the pictures, the stories, the videos of how those refugees are being treated when they go to Europe. And another example in South Africa, tens of thousands of people have died in Africa in the last century as a result of practices from the mining industry. Several deaths and debilitating diseases are due to asbestosis in South Africa, and recently there is an increased repression on South African labor union by the recent government. Ecuador, I think I remember Steve Wing also mentioned about that Chevron built substandard oil wells in Ecuador in 1964 to cut costs. They deliberately put inferior technology to make their operations cheaper. After the company left in 1992, they left approximately 1,000 toxic waste pits open and dumped billions of gallons of toxic water into rivers. In Haiti, this is another example I found that in a company in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, wanted to dump ash from incineration of toxic waste, and they basically put that on a ship to take it to a third world country and dump it. And what happened, none of the country would accept that toxic waste, so they went to Haiti and said, this is a fertilizer. And they dumped that in Haiti. Eventually, Haitian government found out the real content of that dump, and they sued against this company in Philadelphia, and they had to come and pick it up and probably dispose within Pennsylvania. And I have some friends from India, and people would know that India is a Hiroshima of environmental disaster. In 1984, we saw the world's largest industrial disaster. 500,000 people were exposed to methyl isocyanate gas and other chemicals leaked from Union Carbide Company, and a company that exists here in the USA. There are estimated that about 8,000 people died within 2 weeks, and 8,000 more people have died ever since. So this is a constant thing that you will do the worst kind of technologies and industries in black and brown communities in the USA and around the world. And now I will finally come to my own home country of Pakistan. I have a friend, Ahsan Kamal, who's with a party, Workers' Party there. And we had a climate disaster where an artificial lake was created due to climate change. This is another thing that we see, that the victims of climate change are mostly black and brown people and poor people. As Brother Saladin was mentioning about Katrina too, if you look at Sandy, it's mostly the poor people or black and brown people who are the biggest victims. But in this particular case in Pakistan, where this artificial lake was created due to melting of a glacier, 1,000 people got homeless. And there's a movement started to get compensation for those people, and military, the Pakistani government has repressed that movement. And they are learning, a lot of governments in the country, around the world are learning from the USA the tactics to repress. The first panel today was state repression and environmental justice movement. So that's an example that I can give you of state repression, that they charge him for terrorism. They are charging environmental justice activists in Pakistan for being terrorists, and they have given him a life sentence to one of the leaders, whose name is Baba Jan, who is with the Socialist Party in Pakistan. So this is just a little glimpse that I thought relevant to my talk of connecting the local to global environmental justice movement. But what I want to really come back, and which I agree, I understand many of you already know, is the cross-sectionality between that. It's not just the global to local, but within the environmental movement, that it has to be connected to the issues of race, to the issues of class. And unless we merge these issues, we cannot solve the real problem. That's another quote that I found from Brother Saladin last year, when he was saying that environmental justice movement is not talking about policy changes. It's not talking about advocacy. Well, it's a matter of life and death for the people. What we are really talking about is changing the balance of power. We are talking about a corrupt or a unjust economic system that unless we change that, and unless we build up power to change it, we are not going to reform it by 1 or 2 reforms. So in that sense, some of the things that I found which are happening in America, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, that we are all conscious of the brutality, the police brutality. What we also can find out in even the same stories of police brutality is the environmental racism. One of the studies that came out in Eric Garner, who was choked to death in New York, was also a victim of asthma. Black children are twice as likely to be hospitalized for asthma and 4 times as likely to die from asthma as white children. A Washington Post story said that black and white people actually breathe different airs. Freddie Gray, who was murdered in Baltimore, was also a victim of lead poisoning. Another story I was reading in Daily Beast said that lead poisoning is killing inner city Baltimore. So it's actually environmental racism as a process to eliminate black and brown people. And this is why I feel the most significance to come to this conference. And I tell my friends actually that there are few conferences and talks that you really need to attend. One is North Carolina NCEJN Summit, another the BWFJ banquet that happens in April. So please, if you are in this area, keep that in your calendar. And that's how I learned my facts. That's how I learned the thing that I'm telling you. An NAACP story found that, a report found that close to 80% of African Americans live within 30 miles of coal-fired power plants. African Americans making $50,000 to $60,000 per year are way more likely to live in a polluted environment than poor white families making just $10,000 per year. People of color tend to live closer to sources of pollution, from coal power plants to busy roads and highways. Black and brown kids suffer higher rates of pollution-related illnesses, and nearly 40% of residents overall who live near a coal power plants are people of color. The top 12 plants with the lowest environmental justice performance scores were within 3 miles of 2 million unsuspecting Americans. 76% of them were people of color. And then regarding the race and class disparities, consider the following. To expand the discussion from environment, USA has the highest number of Nobel winners in the field of medicine, which recently were awarded, and some of the best innovations in medicine. And yet there is an extreme disparity in healthcare in the USA. USA is shockingly ranked 34th in the world in infant mortality. Infant mortality is double in blacks than in whites. USA is witnessing one of the highest inequalities in the last 100 years, where inequality in the US in 2007 was as extreme as in 1927. According to a study by Urban Institute, whites had 3 times more wealth than blacks and Hispanics in 1983, while currently they have 7 times more wealth than black and brown people. These wealth disparities are passed from generation to generation, leaving people trapped in these racist conditions. And environmental racism is just one product of that. Economic hardships and working people are coupled with astronomical growth in the prison population in the USA. What do you do to dispose of the black and brown people? Push them into the prisons. There was a talk about school to prison pipeline. Somebody mentioned that kids from early age are predisposed or pushed into a prison system. Between the late 80s and the late 2000s, there has been 350% increase in the prison population in the USA, whereas crime rate did not significantly increase that time. The prisoners are increasingly poor and black. Black represent 12.3% of the US population, but they represent 43.9% in American prison population. And of course, this is a fact that is often repeated nowadays on TV, and I think President Obama also talks. The USA has 5% of the world population. US makes 5% of the world population, but USA has 25% of the world's prisoners. So this is just to give a background of where I believe environmental North Carolina EJ is coming, or BWFJ, because they have that broader perspective that we are not talking about one single isolated struggle. It's part of a broader oppressive system of white supremacy and racism. And I will go and now connect it to the, in my opinion, the anti-colonial aspect. What's happening here, what I am seeing in the North Carolina environmental justice to people like me from Pakistan or from India or Brazil or South Africa, to us that's an anti-colonial perspective. When Eric Garner repeated, "I cannot breathe," 11 times before he was choked to death by a New York City police official. In fact, that is a metaphor used by the iconic anti-colonial writer Frantz Fanon, who said, "When we revolt, it is not for a particular culture. We revolt simply because for many reasons we cannot even breathe." And this is where we are seeing the riots. We don't even call them riots, we call them uprisings. The uprisings in Ferguson, uprising in Baltimore. People around the world are seeing that as anti-colonial movement. Again, Brother Saladin mentioned that this is not a matter of a policy change. This is a matter of life and death for the people. One of the other honor that I got working with Black Worker Justice 2 or 3 years ago was record the speech by Chokwe Lumumba. I don't know how many people are aware of Chokwe Lumumba, who was associated with the Free the Land movement. And this is the background of Black liberation movement that I see in the Black Worker Justice and the North Carolina environmental justice movement, where there is a belief that the US South, the agriculture black belt was constructed or produced through the labor of the slaves. So black people have the right, legitimate right to own the land. This is the perspective of free the land, which Pakistani and Indian have of freeing their country from the British occupation. To us, that is a campaign against occupation. The work of NCEJN and Black Worker Justice had the same black liberation and empowerment for the marginalized perspective, for the marginalized perspective that inspire people all over the world. And in the end, I would say that if there are basically these are the two events that you should mention, definitely come. I do want to actually acknowledge one more thing about Brother Saladin, and this is a blessing I believe that we got through, that he's also a founder of an organization called Muslims for Social Justice, which we founded 2 years ago, whose objective is to build a progressive force within the Muslim forces, within the Muslim community. I remember today, Brother Saladin also mentioned about the governor of Louisiana, Bobby Jindal, and I want to talk a little bit about that too. Yeah, this is a phenomenon that many South Asian and the immigrant Muslims face, that there is also the oppressive system that we are facing also creates pockets of privilege within the oppressed people and put those black and brown faces, unfortunately, from our countries as governors, as experts, that there is also, unfortunately, a discrimination and racism and tendency to become part of the white privilege that exists in many immigrant communities. So one of the objectives of Muslim for Social Justice is also to fight that tendency for being part of white privilege within the immigrant Muslim community. But basically, the Muslim for Social Justice has a basic slogan or mission that we are committed for human rights and social justice for all, irrespective of race, class, color, gender, or sexual orientation. The forces that are demonizing and dehumanizing Muslims are the same forces that are causing environmental racism. They are the same forces that are attacking women. They are the same forces that are attacking LGBT community. They are the same KKK and white supremacist and Confederate forces. I'll inform you, I don't know how many people will be in Chapel Hill on October 25, but there is a KKK Confederate rally in Chapel Hill, of all the towns in Chapel Hill, they are doing against the movement against Silent Sam, which is a movement to remove Confederate symbols from UNC Chapel Hill. But they have another agenda, which is demonize the refugees, demonize the Muslim refugees. So to me and to all of you, this is my basically invitation to please join us, Muslim for Social Justice and other allies. We have another organization in the Triangle area mostly. It's called Movement to End Racism and Islamophobia. We are looking all of these movements as connected. I will even go to Palestine movement. The real issue in Palestine is about land grab, is about water resources. If you look at the construction of the wall by Israel outside the 1967 border, it's all about taking the land. So in all of those foreign oppressions, we see a clear link. What we are saying, we need to connect the liberation struggles locally to globally. And there was a mention of the Moral Monday movement. We have been participating in Moral Monday movement repeatedly. We have gone there. We have participated in HKNJ. And this is, I believe, where we need to further strengthen those coalitions through a People's Assembly process. That was the birth of HKNJ. So with that, I basically have come to the end, but I will end with a chant that has been popularized by Moral Monday movement, which starts, forward together, not one step back.